So today we are going to clean out and reset up our leopard gecko enclosure. We have a few juveniles that were in here that are starting to get a little bit bigger now. They're going to be separated out to different enclosures, but at least one or two of them, depending on the sex, are going to be going back into this enclosure, and it needs a lot of work. So we got to get the food dishes out, get their hides and their decor out, and get everything cleaned up. We did notice a few roaches running around. As soon as you start lifting up bowls, you usually see the leftover bugs, crickets, roaches, whatever you have in there, just scatter everywhere. So we're gonna get all that cleaned up, and you can see how to set up your leopard gecko enclosure. Alright, so we got their food and water dishes out, get their hides out. You can see those roaches everywhere in there. These are actually our baby Madagascar hissing roaches. We do have dubia roaches too, but we actually have our own breeding colony of Madagascar hissing roaches, which these babies that's what these look like. Madagascar hissing roaches, the biggest way to tell the difference when they're babies is the Madagascar hissing cockroaches have a lot shinier of a shell. You can see that right there. That is definitely a Madagascar hissing roach. You can see they're much more narrower. They're not as bodied as the dubia roaches. Don't want to let them get out though. And their shell is a lot shinier than dubias do. Dubias tend to be very dull shells. The Madagascar hissing roaches have a bright and shiny shell. So we will get all this stuff out here, get it cleaned up, and get to remaking their enclosure. We're just going to scoop up all of this substrate right here. It's got a lot of, these are volcanic rocks in here. They're just some decor stuff you can get at Home Depot. But we're actually going to take all of this out. Most of this we're going to sort through it, make sure there's not any big messes in here. We'll actually use all of this stuff as the drainage layer on the bottom when we remake this enclosure. And all of this waste, there's some waste product in here. Most of that will stay in here. It'll actually help it because this is going to be becoming a bioactive enclosure. So that will just help give the bugs and eventually some plants some nutrients for growing. And the roaches will be right in there too. They'll be fine because it's not very easy trying to pick out all the roaches out of all this mess. So we'll just leave most of them right in there. They'll be fine. They'll crawl themselves around. So we'll leave them all in there for now. Yeah, so one good thing about keeping leopard geckos, you'll find that most leopard geckos tend to find one corner of the enclosure and use that same area to go to the bathroom every single time they go to the bathroom, which makes cleanup with your leopard geckos very easy, which is a lot of help when you have a lot of animals like we do, where you can just go in, clean up the little spot in the corner, and you're done cleaning the enclosure for the day. So one cleaner I highly recommend if you keep any sort of animals is Simple Green. It is a very good, not only is it a really good cleaner, it is 100% biodegradable and 100% safe for any animals that you're keeping. When I worked in the zoo, we actually used Simple Green to clean all of our enclosures. So it is a great product to use. I've used it for probably the last 15 years, and it's the only cleaner I buy for my reptiles, and it works amazing. So let's get this all cleaned up. wiping it down, you always want to make sure you wipe everything back down. Even though this cleaner is 100% safe for your animal, you never want to leave any just on the enclosure. You want to make sure you wipe it all down, get it all off after you are done. Make sure your glass is all clean and pretty. You want to be able to see your animals. Get everything wiped down. Get all that residue off of there. Make sure your glass looks all nice. Get all the dirt. Another thing that you're going to have to deal with, especially if you keep your reptiles like I do, with my reptile room is basically takes up half of my basement. Needed the largest area possible in the basement. Works out for being able to have a large area for my animals. You're going to get a lot of cobwebs, lots of spiders, constantly trying to having to go up here, get all the cobwebs out, spiders out that try to make my reptile enclosures their home. We don't want spiders in our reptile cages. So that is something that, unless you live somewhere that doesn't have any spiders, which if you live somewhere without spiders, let me know, 'cause I want to go there. You're going to have to deal with spiders all over your enclosures all the time. They like the safety and the food. It's an endless supply of food for spiders with all the crickets and the bugs that go into your enclosures. Let's clean our glass over here. Try to do this left-handed. Try not to wiggle you around too much there. Looks not too bad. To the fun part, the enclosure. So we're going to start by re-adding back in that gravel layer that we took out to put down as our drainage layer. So let's get that stuff, pour it back in here. You want to make a nice layer. You want a good 1 to 2 inches of a drainage layer, especially when you're doing any sort of bioactive tank, because you're going to want to keep that bottom layer moist. That is what's going to give the plants that you have in there enough moisture to be able to keep them growing. But especially with this, this will be more of an arid enclosure, since leopard geckos come from the Middle East, where they're not going to be coming out of lush forests. They're going to be coming out of something that looks a lot more like a desert, or at least an arid grassland. Let's get some more drainage layer for this enclosure. So you're going to want to have a fairly thick drainage layer on the bottom here, so that your substrate that your leopard geckos are sitting on, walking around in all the time, doesn't keep their enclosure too humid. So you're going to want a nice good drainage layer. Get some more of those rocks in there. Let's throw some of these river rocks in there too, just to give it a little more. Give it a nice, good drainage layer. Spread that all around. You have some sand in there left over. It's fine. All it's going to do is add to the uh, drainage layer a little bit. It's better. This helps you save a little bit of money if you reuse all of your old stuff. Don't always, when you're redoing an enclosure, don't throw away the gravel or the dirt when you're doing it, because a lot of times that dirt, especially if you do keep bioactive tanks, that dirt has a lot of beneficial bacteria and bugs and all that good stuff already living in it. So you just want to take it out, clean out as much debris in it as possible, and you're going to reuse it for lots of enclosures. If you don't use it for the regular uh, top level of your enclosure, it is a great addition to use as your drainage layer. Reuse as much as possible, especially when you're keeping this scale of reptiles. As everyone knows, you never see why you never see anyone with three reptiles, because you get one, and then you love it, and you get a second one, and then you jump straight to 15. Uh, so anyone that keeps reptiles know that they are not cheap. It is a fun, exciting hobby, but you're gonna go through a lot of money trying to keep it up. After you have your drainage layer down, you're gonna start putting in your substrate for this enclosure for your enclosure. For this one, it's going to be a mixture of play sand, as these guys come from, like I said, the very arid uh, part of the world. So we're going to do a mixture of play sand mixed with some organic soil, organic garden soil. The organic garden soil is going to give the enclosure a little bit of humidity that it needs, as well as if we do later on down the road decide to add some plants to this, which we are probably going to do. You can mix it ahead of time. It's probably a better idea. Why don't you mix it ahead and then put it all in here rather than putting it in here and then trying to mix it all together. I just don't have an extra bucket to mix it with, so we're going to do it the hard way today. When you are picking out soil to use in any of your enclosures, make sure that you're getting 100% organic soil. Make sure you look at the ingredients list on the soil. Make sure it doesn't have any additives in it. Like you're not going to want, make sure you don't want to get Miracle-Gro because it has a hormone additive into the dirt to help your plants grow, which is great for plants. It's not great for animals. So make sure you're getting 100% natural. You can pick these up right at Lowe's or Home Depot. I do have reptile soil from the pet store, some Zoom Med Reptisoil, Repta Bark, all that kind of stuff. Coconut fiber bedding. It's great for these guys. Coconut fiber bedding, you can adjust the humidity level by adding or taking away water from the substrate, which makes it great for leopard geckos too. Give that a mix. See what we're working with here. We're gonna want at least 2 to 3 inches on top of that drainage layer of substrate. It's good, especially if you have any breeding animals out there. It gives them a nice layer to dig in and lay their eggs. Some people like providing nest box with really no other digging material for the animals. But for all my animals, my geckos, my bearded dragons, my Rankin's dragons, I always like to just provide them with a very natural enclosure with a sand or a loose substrate bottom that they can dig into that's several inches thick. And you're just going to want to keep an eye on them. You can tell what time of year they're going to be breeding for the most part, and just look for signs. You'll see them start to dig. When you see them start digging, as long as you're checking on them every day, which you should be doing with your reptiles, you will notice any breeding or getting ready to lay eggs behavior. And you just go around and check the enclosure. You can usually tell where they've been digging. Go to that part of the enclosure and carefully start digging through the sand and you'll find your eggs. It makes it a little bit harder to find them sometimes, but I think it is much better for the animal that is in the enclosure. It just makes them feel like they're in more of their natural environment and not just a glass tank. When you have animals out in the wild, they're not going to be living on paper towels. They're going to be living on dirt. So a lot of people say, "Oh, don't keep your animals on sand. Don't keep your bearded dragons on sand. It's not good for them. They'll get impacted." Well, what do you think they live on in the wild? Are they living on paper towels and glass? No, they're going to be living on dirt. And as long as you have a healthy animal, the chances of it getting impacted are very, very, very slim. I have been keeping and breeding bearded dragons for the better part of 20 years or more. I have, since the very beginning, kept all of my adults on sand, and I have yet to have a single impaction on any of my animals. I have had hundreds and hundreds of bearded dragons over the year. I have bred them many times over the last 20 plus years. My babies I do keep on a paper towel until they get about 4 to 6 months old and they're big enough, and they go right under the sand just like their parents. Never had a problem. Babies can tend to get a little bit more easily impacted because of their small size, small digestive tracts. And in the wild, the baby dragons are probably not going to be running around in the middle of the desert on the sand like the adults are. They are going to be sticking to probably mainly rocky areas where they're not going to be coming into contact with a whole lot of dirt and sand. They're going to be living in rocky outcrops, and so that's where they're going to be eating. They're not going to, so it's okay to keep them on a harder substrate, tile. Don't recommend just a plain glass bottom because reptiles don't tend to do very good. They can't run around very well. It's very slippery. They kind of fumble all over the place and just not good for them. So we're almost done with this, and we can start adding in our decor. Just build up the back here a little bit. Just want to kind of have this sloping a little bit, have the back of the enclosure a little bit higher, sloping towards the front. That's going to be a little bit more on the low end. Looking good. Let's just even that out a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. We're going to start adding our decor. First thing we're going to do these guys, since they are from the desert area where you're going to find lots of rocky outcroppings, we're going to add these cool little rocks we have here. So we're going to actually dig these out a little bit, dig a little spot so that we can actually bury those a little bit, make them look a little better. Actually, it helps stabilize them too, so if they start climbing on them, they're not going to knock them over as easily, which these leopard geckos definitely will climb on the stuff in their enclosure. Let's do another one over here. Maybe kind of divide this enclosure in half a little bit. We are going to have multiple geckos in here, so let's kind of divide this enclosure. Gives them some visual barriers. So if you're ever keeping more than one animal in an enclosure, You'll have many people out there. I'm sure there'll be many people commenting on this video. Never keep more than one animal in an enclosure. It's horrible. It's cruelty. I know. Some people think it is. But again, in the wild, does every animal have their own 3 foot by foot and a half enclosure? No, they don't. They do have territories, but at some point, they are going to come into contact with each other. I know keeping them enclosed like this, they don't have a lot of room to get away from each other. They're not going to be confined in this small of a space on the wild. I understand that. But they are going to come into contact with each other in the wild. And as long as you don't have two males together, which is one thing I never do, is keep two males of any reptile species together. Most females will get along with each other. In most reptile species, the females tend to get along. You will occasionally have a dominant female that does not get along. So you always want to keep an eye on any animals that you are cohabiting, keeping in the same enclosure together so that you can separate them if needed. I always have uh, an extra tank, an extra 20 tanks that I can separate these guys if need be. But again, after 20 plus years of keeping reptiles, I can name the amount of times I've had to do that on one hand. That is not a lot, seeing as how I have cared for probably literally thousands of animals over the past couple of decades of keeping reptiles. So I like that. That's fairly insecure. I got these I really like from the dollar store. I got a bunch of these cool little signs and decorations that I'm starting to put in a lot of my enclosures. I just think they look really cool. It adds a little fun element to keeping your reptiles. One of my favorite part of keeping reptiles is actually making their enclosures, making them look really cool and very naturalistic, like you're taking a snapshot of what they would look like out in the wild. So we're going to add this. Let's do right over here. We'll pretend like this is like a little trail going between the mountains over there. This is the trail entrance over here. Let's just bury that in the sand. Welcome to the National Forest Hiking Trail. There we go. That is good there. We have our little forest trail. Maybe we'll even put some little additional stepping stones there. I've got some more stones over stones. Maybe we'll make a little trail there. It'll look kind of cool. What else we got? We got some hides. Natural looking rock hides. You want to separate them all over the enclosure. When you are keeping multiple animals, one of the most important things is to make sure every animal in the enclosure has their own hide so that they can get away from each other if they want to. The animals are going to want to get away from each other at some point or another. So I want to make sure they have their own places to go off to. And for their water dish, we're going to use these. I've got a couple of these. I don't remember where I've gotten them. I've just collected them over collecting reptiles and their decor. This is a cool little water dish that just kind of looks like a natural stone pond. I would think this is probably something that you would find out in the Middle East desert slash arid scrublands that you would find these leopard geckos in. It would just be basically a puddle out there, rocks, and these cool things. You just bury them up to there, and it just sits. All you're gonna see is that little lip. Kind of looks like just rocks. They have made this little formation, this little puddle. Put that down in there. See some more sand under there. The only thing about these is you tend to have to clean them out a lot because when you set this in there, it is the top of the water is right even with the ground. So they tend to drag a lot of that substrate and just drag it right into the water there. So your water tends to get dirty fairly quick, but until it does, it makes a pretty cool looking water dish. It's like a water basin in the middle of a Rocky Mountain at a national forest hiking trail. One of the last parts, since this is going to be a bioactive enclosure, is these. These are some magnolia leaves. We're just going to take these, rip them apart, kind of sprinkle those around the enclosure, bury them down in a little bit maybe. It gives your springtails and your isopods something to eat. It will also biodegrade and turn into soil food, bug food. If you're keeping leopard geckos, I highly recommend one of these. They're awesome. It is a cave that you can put against your glass. And my leopard geckos love using this. I find them all the time sitting in here. They like to sleep in there. It's nice and dark. Your reptiles will love to sleep in this. So we've been putting it over here. It's probably the best place to keep it. We're going to put it back over here. Set it like that. This part right here is just a magnet. It goes on the outside of the glass. I'll show you guys here. Just take this, slide it down, and it magnets to the glass. And the hole, let's move it over that way a little bit. The hole is right over there, and your leopard geckos will go on, climb in there. Then you can come along and look from the outside, which I'll show you guys later after I put the geckos back in here, because I guarantee they're going to be back in there before the night's over. And I'll show you what they look like while they're sleeping in there. Got this half a log. It is kind of cool. Kind of looks like it would be like a tree that fell down, half rotting out, something that they might find in the desert. Maybe that might not work. Maybe bury it down a little bit into the ground. I think it looks like it's falling over and it's starting to get buried. There we go. All right. What do you guys think? Think it looks pretty good. Let's add our isopods. We have a colony. I believe these are dairy cow isopods. Yeah, a little colony of them going in here. So we're just gonna shake some of those off into there. Take a handful of this. Spread them out. All right, leave the rest of them in here so they can continue to breed. Those handful in there should be good. They will find their way in there. They'll eat the leaves that we've scattered along, and hopefully they will continue to multiply and grow, and we'll have a nice flourishing colony of dairy cow isopods in here. Let's get them some water, and we'll get our leopard geckos in here. Give water into their little rock pond over here, and let it flow out a little bit more. Whenever I'm filling up the water dishes in my reptile enclosures, I like to let it overflow, especially when I have the bioactive enclosure like this that has a drainage layer. I like to let the water overflow and flow down into it. Just helps give that water that you want in the drainage layer of your enclosure. Let it flood a little bit. Flooding happens in nature. Just let it happen. Let's get our geckos back in here. So if you look at that right there, to me, that looks like a female. A male, you're going to see at the base of the tail right there, you're going to see some nice big bumps on either side. And you're going to see those femoral pores are going to be a lot more pronounced in a male. So I would say this is a female. First female going back into the enclosure. Next one here. If you look again, no big bulges, not very big femoral pores. I would say this is another female. It looks like another female to me, so we're going to put her in there. And then this last one that I looked at actually does look like a male. I can show you what I'm talking about when I'm looking at those pores. So if you look at this right here, you can see those nice two big, see if we can, if will show. You'll see at the base of the tail right there, those are two large bumps right there. That's where its hemipenes are. And the femoral pores right above that vent area are a little bit more pronounced in this. So I would say this is a male. When you're keeping leopard geckos, we do have the boundary set up and all of their hide so that all of them can get away from each other. We have visual barriers with this right here separating the two. So I have one male and two females. This is a 40-gallon enclosure. I've never had a problem keeping one male and with two females. So that is perfect. I don't have to separate them for now. We will see how they get along. They've been living in here together for quite a few months now. They've been getting along quite fine. We have one male to two females, adults. These guys should be fine. You always want to keep an eye on them. If for some reason they do start fighting, that is when you're going to want to separate them. And we always have enclosures that we can do that with. So you can see these guys checking out their new enclosure. Boy over there is already climbing on those rocks. He looks so cool climbing on those rocks, coming over, exploring all their new stuff they got going on in here. So that's it. That is our leopard and gecko enclosure. It's easy enough. Anyone can do it. So what do you guys think of it? Is it something that you would want to do for your leopard geckos? Let us know in the comments down below how you would set up your enclosure. Would you want to make it look like their environment, or would you, instead of adding rocks and rock hides and rock ledges and rock water dishes, would you add something that looks a little bit different? Maybe regular water dishes, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with the regular ceramic water dishes, or trees, or anything else really. If you found any of this video helpful and interesting, I would ask that you please drop a like down there. Let us know that you actually like our video. If you want to see more videos like this in the future of us doing enclosure builds, let us know in the comments down below. We would love to have your feedback on what you want to see us doing. Do you want us to do more informational videos on specific reptile species? Do you want us to do more enclosure builds like this? Do you want us to do whatever you want us to do? Fun, wacky, crazy reptile stuff. I don't know. Let us know. See you next time.